Hey guys, it's Elena. The day that I'm recording this video is October the 12th, and it's the day after I have released my Acrylic Pour brush set for Procreate, and I have to say I'm completely blown away by the amazing response I've had from all of you, and I've seen so much amazing artwork already coming from members of the community. So thank you to all of you who have been supporting these brushes and sharing your artwork. You've really brought me a lot of joy. And so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and have a play with the brushes myself and take you guys along with me and see what we come up with. So let's go ahead and get started. So I wanted to do something sort of similar to this that I have in my preview images. However, you know, things can go in a completely different direction. So let's just see where it takes us. So I'm going to make a new artwork that is 3000 by 2000 pixels. And for this piece, I wanted to keep a white background and not let the artwork go out to the edges. So I want it to be sort of contained on the page. So this would be kind of as if you had poured white paint onto the canvas and then you poured the colors on and let those sort of seep out into the white, which is a look in acrylic pour painting that I really enjoy. So for this artwork, we're going to be using my Fluid Acrylic Dark color palette, and this comes with the brush set. And the brush set we're using is the AJ Acrylic Pour. So to start out with, I'm going to use the basic starter brush, which I'm just going to kind of randomly put out some colors in a pattern that a progression of colors that I like. And from that point, we're going to use liquify. I think I'm going to make this a bit bigger and just have some big whooshes of color. So I think yellow and green is a nice combination, so I'm letting this mix a little bit so that we've got a couple of different shades going on in here. I'm mostly just trying to get a nicely colored blob as I'm doing this. The color is what really matters here. It's not the shape at all, because the shape's going to completely change when we start to use liquify. Okay, now that I've done that, I've just not really gone out to the edges, but I've kind of just added some colors that I like in the middle. So now we're going to the Magic Wand Adjustments menu, then all the way down to Liquify. And I'm going to choose Push with my distortion all the way up, and everything else pretty much all the way up as well. The momentum is basically how far your stroke goes. So if you're like really coming at it with some paint, then it's going to ripple across the whole page. Whereas if you have low momentum, then it's not going to ripple as much, and it's like you're not using as much. So I like to keep that about halfway, and I might adjust it as I go. So let's just experiment with this and see where it takes us. I like to have my distortion up pretty high, as I've said in other videos already, because you get this ripply look, and I do feel like that is more realistic than just straight edges. It looks more like there's white paint behind it as we work around with it. The nice thing about liquify as well is that you can, if you're starting to dislike a certain color or a certain area, you can always just kind of knead it around, because I wasn't really liking that color in there. I thought it was a bit just yucky looking, yucky brown, so I got rid of some of that. And if you really don't like something, you can always use edge and then just zip it up a little bit tighter so that it basically disappears. I think this is a bit too much of a square, so I'm going to make this bigger and do some strategic pushing just so that we get a bit more of an interesting shape and not just a square. The smaller your size is with liquify, the more control you're going to have over the whole thing. Okay, I think I will leave it at that for now, and all this can still change. But at this point, I would like to use my cell brushes. Well, first I think I'm going to go down to my swipe with cells first, and I'll use these and then I will add some cells on top. So let's go with number 7 and see where this takes us, just kind of playing around with this in small strokes to begin with. So what I'm doing is I'm choosing a darker color at this point and then dragging it onto the lighter color, and I do undo what I've done sometimes. If I don't like the particular cell pattern that's coming out, I'll just undo it and try again. And sometimes I'll just come in from the side and drag some of that white background onto the color. Sometimes it's nice because you can just undo something if it's not exactly what you had in mind, and just keep on trying until it turns into the sort of happy accident that you might have been looking for. So it's not really an accident at all in that case. These brushes are good for using the colors that are already on the canvas, the swipe with cells brushes, and you kind of have to have one color next to another in order to utilize this. If this is all one color on the canvas, then you wouldn't have as much of a contrast between the different colors. So if you want a huge contrast, then you can always use the cell brushes by themselves in a completely different color, if you want the cells to become something that just isn't even there yet. So what I'm working on now is just smearing things into each other, smearing colors into each other in a way that I am enjoying. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that so far. I think that I will do the same with cells number 8. These 7 and 8 go pretty well together. They have a similar large, dense pattern on them. So I'm going to try a bit with this as well. Okay, at this point I'm going to get a bit more drastic and go to my smudge tool and select some of the dynamic cell brushes under the smudge tool and see where that takes me to have a bit more of a dramatic effect by dragging the colors in a more substantial way. I'm trying to choose an area that has more than one color in it so that I can drag more than one color, hopefully, with the cells. So I did manage it with that one. You can see there's some multicolored bits in there, but I think it's a bit too big. So I'm going to go from this same area where we've got the teal and the yellow and the olive green all mixing in together and see if I can drag that across. Okay, I like that. I like how we've got some blue in here and some yellow and some of the green. So I'm going to keep trying to do that in a couple different areas here. And I'll switch to dynamic cells number 2, which sort of corresponds with swipe with cells 8. And then I'll work with that. I'm not a huge fan of how this is looking, so I'm going back to my brush and back to swipe with cells, and I think I'll go with number 4 and just swipe that downwards. And I might do that in a couple places so we have a bit more of a wispy look. With these swipe with cells brushes, if you go really fast, you're going to push a lot out of the way. But if you go a bit slow and just kind of let it wiggle as it's going in, you can get this more of a soft faded look. So back to the smudge tool, and I think that I will do one more big type of cells, dynamic cells number 1. Sometimes just a quick flick from the outside can give you a nice spread of cells on the inside that are dragging the white inward, like that. And I'm just going to go to my blowtorch, which is similar to the dynamic cells, but it's smaller, and work a bit with this to add a bit more texture. So these can be a lot more subtle. For instance, in an area like this where you've got a big chunk of cells that just kind of stops, then I'd like to take this color and sort of drag it up so that it's not quite such a stark contrast. So just give that a bit more of a texture. This brush gets bigger and more opaque as you are pushing harder. So now I'm going back to my brushes. And at the very bottom, we've got add cell texture and add ripple texture. And these are blender brushes as well. They don't add anything where you don't already have something going on. And so I'm going to look for some areas kind of like this one where we don't have a lot of texture and add a bit of a subtle texture in here. And I'm going to play with the opacity because if you have a light colored artwork, then you'll want the opacity higher, but if you have a dark colored artwork, then it might stand out a bit too much. So I'm going to play with what I need for this. And again, you can stop what you're doing and then go again if you want a different pattern. If you don't like the pattern that's coming out, then just changing your brush or undoing it and then trying again will give you a new piece of the texture. So this just puts a little bit of an extra texture on here, and I think for this yellow it's actually great that the opacity is all the way up. This also gets darker as you push harder. So sometimes we have this texture already from using liquify, like right here. So what I'm doing is just giving the areas that don't have ripples in them a bit more texture. This is where I have to turn the opacity down a bit. So now I am going back to liquify, and this time, similar to a previous tutorial I just made, we're going to use expand just to add a bit of interest to some of these cells. So I've got my distortion down to 14. I'm going to make the size about 20, but I'll keep playing with that depending on how big these cells are. And I'm not going to do this with all the cells, but just with a few of them, just to give it a bit of interest, like this big one here. When I see something like this that looks a little bit like it's laying on top of these sort of rivers, I just try to make that expand a bit so that we have more like it's disturbing the paint as it's going. I hope that makes sense. That always seems like a good opportunity if something is sitting right on top of a line like that. Okay, so at this point, I am happy with this, but I would like to add just a little bit of gold in some little rivers and veins of that. So I'm adding a new layer above everything else, because so far I've done everything all in the same layer so far, but at this point I'm adding a new layer because with metallics that is quite important. So with my Fluid Acrylic Dark palette, I'm choosing this gold here, and I'm going to choose the Gilding Leaf brush and start to add just a couple of little rivers of gold in here. And I'm letting my pressure vary a lot as I go. I'm just trying to be really random with this. Just tracing along lines that already are there and letting the pressure vary a lot. The gold and the yellow don't really contrast very well, so I'm trying to avoid the yellow as much as possible. So I think that I am about done with that. That was a lot of fun, and thank you so much for watching and coming along with me for that. And I hope that you have gotten some ideas of some things that you can do, and I hope that you continue to enjoy working with the brushes if you have them, or if you don't have them, I hope that you were able to find some things that you could still use. The liquify is still available for anyone who doesn't have the brushes. And anyway, I hope that you got some inspiration from this, and thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you next time.